Pop Culture Pastor.
Cody, I don't think there's anything more scary than being in an enclosed underground space with the water level rising. That's some nightmare fuel for me personally. Because I think I'm sort of claustrophobic, but also drowning seems like it would suck.
I think that it would be worse if you couldn't see where you were going.
If you couldn't see?
Yeah.
How would that be worse? Like if it was dark, you mean?
Like, especially if you're like in a cave environment where there could be a ledge or something.
I see. I got you what you're saying. Either way, it's sort of a place I don't want to be.
It's a place I live.
But that is where we left Josh Gates. Have there been any other cliffhangers quite so cliffhangery in Expedition Unknown history? I couldn't think of one.
They have found like bombs or explosives underwater. And they left with, is that thing live?
I like the questions we discussed in last week's episode, whether we thought how much of this is staged, how much of it is real. This actually seemed pretty legit, pretty real. Judging by the reactions, especially of the people. I didn't notice this last week, but when they were showing previously on Expedition Unknown, the guy that yells, "Get Josh out," is not a townie. He is American. And so I'm assuming he's like with the show. He's not one of the...
Yeah, he's part of the production crew.
That told me that this was pretty real.
As real as it gets.
You know what else is real?
What?
A Pop Culture Pastor podcast. Watch-alongs, which is what you're listening to, for episode 2 of Expedition Unknown. You don't seem as jazzed as I am.
I am so jazzed. I am as cool as a felon.
I'm going to need you to pick up the energy level. That's what I'm saying.
Selling with Magellan.
Okay, let's now take it back down. Take it back down a little bit. This is a part 2. When last we left Josh, he was on the hunt for what they thought was the remains of the tomb of Alexander the Great in Alexandria. I think they seem like, you know, they were able to map the structure in the tunnels before they started filling up with water.
As one does.
And so that's kind of where we left off. Now it's time for episode 2. You want me to start it the way they started?
Okay.
The past is all around us. A world of mystery, danger, and adventure. Josh travels to the 4 corners of Earth to find where legends end and history begins. I'm Dave Rimbold. He's Cody.
I am.
And this is Pop Culture Pastor Watch-Alongs Unknown. No, that doesn't work, does it?
Well, we definitely know where we're going.
We're in the studio, and then we're going to go home.
Yep.
After we're done. You know, maybe I'm drinking a Mountain Dew.
I'm not.
So whatever you're doing, you're listening to this podcast because you either like us or you like Expedition Unknown, or maybe you just like Josh Gates. I don't know.
Or all the above.
Will Josh die? That was the question we were left with. Well,
I was not left with it.
We were pretty sure Josh was going to make it. So we rejoined Josh in a tunnel, quickly filling with water deep in the bowels of Alexandria, the largest city on the Mediterranean.
Common knowledge to us that are in the know.
Not me. I didn't think it existed before last week's episode.
Part of it exists underwater.
I love that I'm like a history guy. I love history, and yet that was a shock to me. I'm like, oh, Alexandria is still there. Nice.
We rebuild.
Yeah. So the water's filling up. Spoilers, they get out.
What?
It's all kind of anticlimactic, as we figured it probably would be.
It only got up to his waist.
Okay, did you think that? It looked way more serious in the previews.
I wonder if certain parts of the tunnel aren't as tall as other parts.
I think he crouched down to make the water look higher on his torso.
Or maybe he was worried about hitting his head, and so he had to crouch.
Yeah, I don't buy it. But that could be too. He is a tall guy. So they get out. I don't think that the fear was staged. There was a lot of fear on his face. And like not how we're used to seeing Josh look. Like it seemed real. The people around him were reacting to it as if it was real. And in fact, it was kind of awkward when they get out because he's there with our gal Calliope.
Calliope.
And he's like, what happened? And she's just kind of like,
it broke.
Yeah, I don't know. So it seemed like that was real. Did you have any thoughts about all that?
I assumed that it was real. I think that you can stage certain things. I think in this modern era, staging dramatic, potentially deadly situations is very frowned upon. My former friend, Bear Grylls, would stage some things, and people were not happy with Bear when they found out that he was staging. So,
is that why he's your former friend? That threw me off a little bit.
We haven't kept in contact.
You and Bear had a falling out
over his stagedness.
Well, what happened was they were arguing, and Cody made himself real big and put his hands up and went, ah! And Bear ran away.
As bears do.
Yeah, I imagine that with the reality TV, are we close to the end of reality TV, or do you think it's just an ongoing genre?
Well, I think that it depends on what you're categorizing as reality TV.
This is definitely reality, don't you think? Well, it's sort of a mixture of documentary and reality.
And so that style, I think, as long as there is a History Channel and a Discovery Channel and a Travel Channel, you're going to keep getting that style. The other format of like celeb doc reality show, I think reality's here to stay.
Okay. Yeah, maybe.
The Kardashians just keep going, even though I'm like, you can stop at any time.
Is that show still on?
I think this is supposed to be the last season, but I feel they said that like 5 seasons ago.
I feel like when they stopped that show and that's been going on this whole time, that maybe that was the cause of all the problems. God was cursing us, maybe. And then the Kardashian show will end and like we'll live in a utopia.
I would love to show Gen Z and younger folks the Truman Show and see what they think about that. But back to this show, which is a lot better than some other reality shows.
Before we get fully back into it, side note, would you vote for Josh Gates for president?
Out of the current bunch, you betcha.
If I said right now, you can have either one of the two guys that you saw sort of debating the other night, or you can have Josh Gates right now. You call it.
I'm going Josh Gates.
Yeah, I don't know how you couldn't. That seems like a no-brainer. Why can't we do that, America?
Name it and claim it.
So he's back. The episode starts with the same crew he was with, Calliope, Limnios, Papakostas.
I wonder if she's related to Uncle Jesse.
What was his last name?
On Full House.
Yeah, I'm aware.
Because
not the Dukes of Hazzard Uncle Jesse.
Not that Uncle Jesse. I feel like his Greek family had a very similar last name.
Papadakis? I don't remember. I didn't like that show.
I feel it's similar. Don't quote me.
So at the end of the last episode, they found, the kind of outer workings of the tomb itself.
Potentially.
And then in this episode, she shows him this line of limestone rocks that seem to be the remains of a very large wall. But Calliope's all, well, we can't say this is Alexander's tomb yet. This is when I find I don't have the patience for archaeology, Cody. Because I'm literally yelling at my TV and I'm like, oh, come on. It's definitely that. This is Alexander's tomb. Let's wrap it up and go home.
It's not how it works, Dave.
That's what I'm told.
As a member of the archaeological community, I was like, we can't say anything definitive yet. There's plenty of historical important buildings in this area. So let's take our sweet time.
Listen, Cody was made for university. He's like, no. The dig's never over. More funding, please.
Yes. And
I know how it works. So they do find some very interesting things about the rock wall. They like one of the rocks is missing and it freaks Calliope out for a minute.
I was on edge at this moment as well.
And then they keep digging and they find the next rock. So apparently something just happened to that rock.
I mean, if you look throughout historical sites, even the Roman Colosseum, like, oh, there's rocks missing. People just take rocks. Quit taking rocks.
Where are they taking that? That's pretty heavy, probably.
Exactly.
So they think they found that wall, but again, Calliope stopped short, need the funding. And then they go to sifting. They do the cool sifting thing.
Which is what I would do.
Yeah. We did that as kids, like at the theme park, where they have the fake gold panning thing. Mm-hmm. And they had the fake jewels. You'd find some jewels, take home a little baggie.
I did that at a cave, but there was real, like, gems, like crystals and shark's teeth.
No, Cody, that's what they told you. They
No.
weren't real.
No, these were real.
Do you still have them?
Yeah. No, it literally looks like any of the crystals that you can buy at the crystal shops.
No, not yours, because they're real.
Exactly.
Probably invaluable.
I don't know about that.
So they find some animal bones, some charcoal, some pottery, and another coin.
So
You're
like,
not as excited about that as I am, but they do find another coin.
The coin was interesting until, like, so they do the cool laser stuff on it, and one side, like, becomes very evident what it is, and then the other side, I'm like, you say that's Alexander's head, but there is nothing there, broski.
Cody, I'm sure you knew before this episode that a coin expert is called a numismatist.
Yes, it's a word that I struggle to enunciate and pronunciate, so I just leave that alone.
I do find that one of the ways I like this show is you find all these jobs that you didn't know were a thing.
Well, someone needed to be determining the historical value of a coin.
So this guy's a coin geek.
Well,
We say that lovingly.
better than being a stamp geek.
At the home here of the Geeks of the Round Table. This guy's welcome at our round table anytime to talk about coins, should he want to.
I can show him coins I found in my backyard.
That's right. Cody's a part-time metal detectorist.
There's another name for that, but we won't get into it.
The coin geek tells us the coin has Alexander on it, which is amazing, actually. That's sort of amazing when you really think about. Honestly, I read something recently. Most people think we live in a fact-based world, which is not really what we live in at all. We actually live in a trust-based world. For instance, you don't know Julius Caesar existed. You trust sources that tell you he did.
I trust he exists because there's a salad named after him.
Yeah, right. So Cody doesn't check out his sources very much. He's willing to take a lot on just pop culture, which, whatever. That's not a bad way to live.
And also that I do celebrate the Ides of March.
My point is that there are many things, even science. A lot of people in culture would say, well, it's science, it's facts, Dave. Not really. You didn't do the experiment. You didn't make the conclusion with the intelligence that you didn't go to school with. You're trusting a source, right? So we're a trust-based world, not a facts-based world. So when you find something that actually has the likeness of a person who lived over 2,000 years ago, that's really cool, Cody.
I mean, I could print a coin now that has that likeness.
That doesn't work, though.
But it does.
They have the radiocarbon dating, which you can't actually prove is a real thing. You trust the source that says, this dates it.
Exactly.
That's my point. My point is it's just cool. It's just cool to have. You don't know George Washington existed. You trust sources that say he did, and his face is on money, but that's not nearly as impressive because it was only, 250 years ago.
Thanks a lot, Dave, for casting doubt on everything we know.
Cody's faith in George Washington is greatly shaken. The Coin Geek says that's definitely Alexander on the coin. And there's this kind of cool exchange between Josh and our friend Calliope, where she's still very, very conservative. It's like, nope, we can't definitively say anything. But he says, are you hopeful? And she says, hope is everything in our line of work. And I say, no, Calliope, hope is everything in life.
I'll agree with both of you.
I like Calliope. I'm sad that we're about to leave her as Josh left her in this moment.
Well, maybe there's some other things in Alexandria, like, I don't know, a library or
Some books,
maybe
Knights Templar treasure.
a watchtower.
Has he looked for the Knights Templar treasure? I can't remember.
Yes.
Okay. I don't remember that episode. So he goes to London, which seems like an odd destination.
It's the most logical place, honestly.
Well, after you hear the explanation, it makes lots of sense. But to meet with historian and author of 5 books on Alexander the Great, Andrew Michael Chugg, who has the best last name in his frat's history. Because that is an amazing name, Chugg. Andrew thinks Alexander and his sarcophagus migrated to London. It's actually quite a logical thing, as we just talked about. Basically, at some point, Napoleon thinks he finds, well, we'll get there. I don't want to spoil that part of it because that's all kind of nuts.
Basically, London/England did not have culture. And so they just stole everyone else's culture.
I didn't know we were going to slander England. That was crazy. I mean, no culture? Robin Hood? King Arthur?
I know there's culture, but they were tired of their basic culture.
It is weird and interesting to watch how colonialism, imperialism affects the past, right? We know how it affects the present, and we could have a long, drawn-out conversation about how it affects the present. But it is interesting to watch in this episode how it literally affects relics.
Oh, yeah.
The history that's important to us. We even see that in modern day wars, like in the Middle East, where you have certain divisions of Islam destroying like historical statues or whatever because they don't line up with their faith or whatever. They're pagan to them. I don't know what they would call it, but we would call it paganism.
Idols,
yeah. But yeah, it's really interesting to think about how it affects our history, our past. And you can say what you want about Europeans, but Europeans seem to be the earliest people in the world who seemed committed to conserving historical things.
to a degree.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but most places in the world, I don't want to single out Muslims because a lot of cultures did that. Where it was like, well, we're just going to pound all that to dust and build over it.
And I will say, though, that the Islamic rally cry versus the Crusades as they go up into Spain, it's because of them that we get out of the Dark Ages because they save science and math.
Yeah, the Crusades are weird, aren't they?
And so, like, as Europe is plunging into the Dark Ages, it's Islam that actually keeps the academics going.
It's so weird how there's a cycle in the history stuff where, you had the Roman Empire, which is kind of the driver of advancement up until a certain point. And then we go into the Dark Ages, which you just wouldn't have thought would have happened after the Roman Empire. Like, what happens?
Good question.
I have thoughts, but not for this episode.
Save it for another day.
So Josh goes to the British Museum, home of the Rosetta Stone and other amazing artifacts. He seems really geeked to be there. And our guy, Andrew Chugg, believes that the sarcophagus that was used to transport the body of Alexander to Alexandria is in his possession in the British Museum there. He starts telling the story about what we talked about last week on the show. Did you catch that?
You'll have to be more specific. I said a lot.
Okay, so last week on the show, I brought up that it was kind of sort of Christianity's fault that Alexander's sarcophagus and tomb, his body gets lost.
Yes.
Well, he brings that up in the reasoning why that all ends up there, why the body is gone, but the sarcophagus is there. He starts talking about the Roman Empire, declaring Christianity the kind of the state religion, and they shut down the pagan temples and sites, which I talked about on the last episode. And yeah, then again, we're back to, I wrote this down in my notes. How weird is it that Alexander's body possibly ends up in a mosque? Because Napoleon captures it, right? Mm-hmm. And he hides it in a mosque, which is just interesting. Did they agree to that? That seems interesting.
There's a lot of things that go on in terms of history, but like creating holy and sacred sites based off of myth, legend, and or items. Yeah, somehow this sarcophagus ends up in a mosque that there's literally one of Napoleon's artists draws it. Yeah. And it's like, oh, well, that looks like this one.
Yeah, it's wild, man. It's wild. Also, Napoleon? I didn't know he was going to be in this story.
So I will say, if this is Ridley Scott's Napoleon, he's too busy blowing up the pyramids.
Did you understand how Alexander's body ends up possibly in St. Mark's tomb? Did you follow that?
So the sarcophagus and the body are separated.
So did they mixed up his and Mark's body? Is that what happened?
So this is my conjecture and my huge issue with the Crusades and a lot of holy sites and relics. The early church would never have, we got to parade around St. Mark. After that dude died, okay, 2 generations later, that's gone. That's lost.
Right.
You could go out to your local graveyard and say, well, this is St. Mark. You betcha. And just dig him up.
Yeah.
And so they said in this episode that, Chugg says that essentially to save the body of Alexander the Great, you say, we think this is St. Mark. Yeah. It's a really old body. And then they point out that at St. Mark's Chapel, there are depictions on the outer walls, and one of them, you see all these people of nobility gathered around this body, and it's not a skeleton. It is a preserved face. And they're like, they definitely weren't preserving St. Mark.
No. And that was the interesting thing. You're right. It's hard to believe that the early church would have saved Mark's body.
They wouldn't. The people of Alexandria would. And these ship merchants stole the body and took it to the Vatican area.
So yeah, there's this whole crazy story now where when this starts filling out, my eyebrows kind of go up. You're like, oh my goodness, wait, what? Alexander the Great may have been the body in St. Mark's tomb? The Gospel of Mark. That's wild stuff. Josh calls this going full Da Vinci Code.
Full Dan Brown.
The full Dan Brown, because Andrew believes that Alexander's tomb or body ends up in St. Mark's tomb in Venice. So Josh is going to Venice, which again, I was like, oh, wow, okay, we're going to Venice now. Site of one of the action sequences in one of my favorite Indiana Jones movies. And so it's also the home of St. Mark's Basilica. Josh goes to talk to Pietro Maloney, a scanning expert. And the relics that exist there in Venice do offer a whole lot of connection to Alexander. I mean, they find this cover piece to the tomb. What they think is that there's more testing that has to be done. But it's got all these symbols and stuff of Macedonia and stuff that would have been connected to Alexander.
I love how they said, well, we could ask to see the body, but We don't think the Catholic Church will allow that.
That was hilarious. Yeah. The actual quote, not surprisingly, the Catholic Church isn't all that jazzed to explore a Mark Alexander switcheroo.
I think it's just as likely, if not more likely, that body's Alexander's than it is St. Mark's.
Well, it sure seems like it, right?
It is either some rando or it's 100% not St. Mark's. I'm sorry.
Well, okay, this is where I don't really understand the Catholic Church, because I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus, and obviously Mark's important to me because of that, because of his gospel, his eyewitness account. What is the fascination with the Catholic Church with these relics of like actual pieces of body? Because that's not the only thing, like hair.
There is a couple things going on. One is you are also trying to convert pagans at this time. And a lot of pagan religions have things you can see, things you can touch, that it's not the invisible God. And so if you have something, even though it's not of God, it's of one of the servants, one of the people that are called to be disciples or saints or whatever, then that's a big deal. Also, within Judaism, some sects, and especially around the time before Christ and even after Christ, there are some groups that have venerated people and that clothing, apparel, or something of this person is important. And I mean, even within the Ark of the Covenant, at one time, I think they have Joseph's bones in it.
Wow.
And so there's a history there for why the Catholic faith has these artifacts, because these are holy people or holy things, and they're separated, and there is some sacred power to it. And like if you had the staff of Moses, holy guacamole, that would be something.
Didn't it turn into snakes?
Yep. And so there's that idea, but then there's also the idea of if you're trying to legitimize your religion to people that need to see something to believe it, the best route to go is these holy artifacts. And then as time goes on, it becomes, well, if you pay us to see these holy artifacts, it might help you get to heaven, or it might help you with your faith. The things of the Crusades are not always on the up and up.
Yeah. Then we get to the Reformatio.
Yes.
Of the whole thing. But that's another story. But that was all very interesting. Thank you.
That's why I'm here.
I actually never have read anything about that, so that was a curiosity to me. So they scan the piece, right, of what they think could possibly be the cover, and like, whoa, no epilepsy warning before we do that, because it's like a strobe light. I was like,
Well, it was just those two and the camera guy, and then us watching.
Then Josh is on his way back to London to reconnect with the Chugmeister. Now he's joined by Joseph Steele, who has another cool name, who's a 3D scanner who uses augmented reality to see if this piece goes with the sarcophagus, if it's part of the cover piece.
I'm not going to lie. I think I could do the 3D scanning.
You think you could be a 3D scanning expert?
Yep.
Like Justin or Joseph?
I do 3D printing, and I feel it's very close.
Probably. You're probably just a shade away from a degree.
Probably.
Where you could do this for a profession. I'm kind of dubious of the tech we were shown. Okay, first of all, it just so happens to be the last corner of the sarcophagus that they scanned where it fits. And then on the screen, it like clicked into place, and I was like, it didn't do that. Stop it.
Logically, they would have tried that spot second at least, because after the first and them saying, oh, this side's rounded, okay, so you go to the opposite flat side and try it.
And the Chugmeister says there's a sword on the end.
Yep.
So why would you put it on the back right part? That doesn't make any sense.
It didn't make any sense at all. Besides that, some aspects I really do think are made for television drama.
Yeah, and I think the clicking into place of on the actual iPad screen or whatever that was part of it, although it was extremely satisfying. And oh my goodness, Alexander the Great was totally in the tomb of Mark, wasn't he?
That's what I'm hearing, because the pieces that were in Venice were discovered in the 60s as they were moving the body of St. Mark upstairs because of too much flooding. And they're like, oh, what's this? This is weird. This kind of looks like a Macedonian logo.
What's this Macedonian nobility doing in St. Mark's tomb?
I know people are like, this show's staged, it's rigged, it's all set up. I legitimately think that Josh met the scanner dude at Venice. I think, though, that the Chugmeister called him before, so he didn't actually fly to London, fly to Venice, and fly back to London. I think it was, I'm in Venice, okay, let's meet at London, let's record this bit of me going to Venice from here, and then let's record this next bit. I don't think that they're leaving this huge, giant carbon footprint.
I'll tell you, this was one of the more interesting segments of any episode of Expedition Unknown yet for me. This whole, once they went to Venice and the whole part with St. Mark's Basilica, that was all very crazy interesting. And you see how the great things of the world can be shifted around and how quickly they become not great. We literally call Alexander the Great, and yet he dies young. His body is glorified for a little bit, but then the Roman Empire makes Christianity the state religion, shuts down all pagan sites, and they have to hide it. It gets lost, and all these things we once revered. Well, Josh quotes something, right? He quotes Percy Shelley, the poet, from the poem Ozymandias.
As one does.
Look upon my works, ye mighty, and despair. Yeah. The mighty will fall. That's the way it is.
Indeed.
And this was a great episode. I loved it. I thought it's maybe one of my favorites when you take both parts together. But specifically, this second part was very interesting to me.
So I don't know if it is in my top 5, but it's close. I do really like learning about Alexander and other huge, almost celebrity historical figures. And especially when you learn things that were not common knowledge. I didn't realize Ptolemy had stolen the body.
Nope.
That wasn't taught in history class. Like him going clear to India and then dying young. Yeah, knew that much. And Val Kilmer being his dad, but
to end this episode, we've been looking for a regular bit.
Okay.
So I think what we're going to do is the best Josh one-liner of the episode. I didn't tell you we were going to do this, so you're not prepared.
I am not.
But to me, it's either just when I think Andrew has read too many Dan Brown novels, or it's, not surprisingly, the Catholic Church isn't all that jazzed to explore a Mark Alexander switcheroo.
It is the switcheroo or the random quoting of Shelley.
Yeah, but it's got to be a one-liner, though. It's got to be funny. Something he does to be funny. But that was, the random quoting of Shelley was kind of amazing. I was like, oh, Josh going deep.
He's a bit of a renaissance man. He'll do some stand-up and then he'll bust out some poetry.
He's an enigma wrapped in a riddle, is Josh Gates. And has quite the following of older females online that I was not aware of.
I assumed he did.
The older ladies love Josh. Cougar magnet. Okay. Yes, those are some funny bits by Josh. And yeah, we're off to episode 3, which I think I saw was going to be something to do with some lost treasure in the American Revolution.
Sweet niblets.
He's coming home. Make way. Josh is coming home. Any thoughts? Any more thoughts before we leave?
I really want to go visit his office.
Do you think that's his real office?
Well, I think that it's at least staged to look like an office, and I would still like to view the stage.
His fake office?
Yeah.
I want to go see his fake office.
It's in New York.
Who am I fooling? I'd like to. I want to sit in his desk and do the monologue.
So, Josh, if you're listening, you can invite us to New York. We'll hang out.
Yeah. Thank you guys for listening. We can't wait for the next episode of Watch Alongs to Expedition Unknown Season 13. Do us a favor. Listen to other of our normal, regular pod if you're new here. We think you'll like them if you're into geek stuff and pop culture. Also, make sure and subscribe so that you don't have to keep looking for our pod, and follow us on social media and give us a review too. If you're going to leave a good one, if you're not going to give us a good review, don't do it.
We're like the Catholic Church. We don't want to have all that negative publicity there.
Yeah, none of that. So awesome. Until next time, until the American Revolution, Cody. We'll see you next week.